Hello, I'm Greg EG.IdrA Fields, and this is an EG replay review. Today we'll be looking at me versus EG.JYP from MLG Columbus 2012. Let's go into the game. Here we see me as the red Zerg at the top right, and JYP as the blue Protoss in the bottom left, and the map is MLG Daybreak. This is a map that a lot of Zergs like. It's very, very easy to get your third base and secure it, just because there's a very long rush distance around the middle, and the three bases are relatively close to each other. They're easy to connect with creep, easy to secure. If it gets into a long game situation, it can be tricky, as Protoss can go for just a half map versus half map split and wear you down. But that's not a terrible situation for Zerg either. However, it does often lead to very long, very drawn-out games, as neither side is really able to do a lot of damage to the other. It's a very good defensive map for the late game. However, we will see some early aggression in this game, and we'll see pretty much a textbook way to deal with it. The very standard three base, no gas style, into quick roaches, around 70 supply, you stop drones, and then just go into roach production and kind of overwhelm your opponent. However, this happened right in between the transition from Mutalist-based styles to Infestor-based styles, ZvP, where a lot of Zergs were still going Muta after the tech switch, or after they hold off any kind of two-base with the roach timing. And now it's much more common for Zergs to go Infestor, and we'll kind of see why in this game. We'll see some of the weaknesses of the Muta style, and how JYP dealt with it, and how Protoss have gotten much better at dealing with that style. And here we can see that my natural was blocked by a pylon, so I'll immediately go down and take the third base. That's well worthwhile. It means that 100 mineral investment didn't really pay off too well for him. Always get the hatchery down as fast as possible at either of your first two bases. Given that Protoss has fast expander, they're not going to be able to do any kind of early aggression to you anyway. One important thing when you do the style is get your second queen before your third hatchery, and head the first one on down after it does its first larva inject. That gets you an extra creep tumor early on. And in this map in particular, a lot of people will still try two-base timings with pylons up here or down here. So having creep along this lane is very, very beneficial. Obviously, you'll surround and engage much more efficiently with the help of that creep. Here we can see JYP building up normal. He doesn't start +1 immediately, but still very quickly with his first under gas. Just a little blunder by him there. Then teching up. Spending Chrono Boost on both the upgrade and the Warp Gate. It would be nice if I had those Zerglings in to see that. However, his first Zealot cleared them away, and also allowed him to get this probe out. Really smart move by the Protoss player. Most of the time, Zerg will pull those Zerglings back, use them with additional Zerglings to fend off the Zealot. That gave him a chance to get this probe out, hit on the map, and gave him the potential put down forward pylons in. As we see, he is upgrading +1. He puts down those immediate 3 gateways. He is going to do a little +1 Zealot pressure, as is pretty common from Protoss. However, this build is very easy to deal with if you do the normal Roachhorn timing. That's double gas on 44 supply, or around 44 supply, drone up, Roachhorn on 54 supply, and then just produce almost purely drones and queens up until 70 supply, and then switch to roaches. Here we see, obviously, a little bit faster than the normal timing. He upgraded, or he got his Nexus before his Forge, and then he started +1 immediately, and he's actually attacking before +1 completes. So that gets it there before the standard timing, and that can mess with Zerg a little. However, I saw those 2 Zealots come out, so I built additional Zerglings, and I was able to hold those first 2 Zealots off. And now we see that my Roachhorn is nearly complete. I'm around that 70 supply magic marker, where I know I'll have to begin roach production in order to hold off any further aggression, as his +1 Zealots are now done. And here he warps in his additional round. I should actually have roaches in production at this point. I believe since I held off those first 2 Zealots, I felt a little bit secure in delaying my roach production, and now I'm Overlord blocked with it. That's a bit of a mistake by me. But here we see the roach production begin, and very importantly, I'm running around with my Zerglings trying to buy time, forcing him to not engage directly. If he had just ran straight into my base, he would have killed a lot of drones, or at least forced me to pull away from mining. As is, I had a lot of extra mining time. He didn't really get in here until these roaches are going to finish, so I really minimized the damage I'm going to take from this rush with that little Zergling harass down here. And as soon as he sees the roaches pop out, he is going to retreat these units. He knows he can't fight against that. And these little Zerglings around there get me a few extra unit kills. Also, we see another queen on the way. Now that I know that I've stabilized, I can invest a little bit more money in creep spread and setting myself up for later on into the game. The scouting overlord placement, very important. You can see his gas timings. I know he didn't get these until a little bit later and then added them on. That told me it was going to be the +1 Zealot rush into some kind of additional all-in. Also, this Zergling spotting for the third base, that's incredibly important, particularly now. Very fast third bases are becoming more and more popular from the Protoss. And more importantly, if you have sight of this base, if you know he hasn't taken a third Nexus yet, you know he is going to have to be aggressive. Protoss can't just sit on 2 bases and not do anything. So at this point, I'm producing almost purely units because I know I am going to have to hold off an attack from him because he does not have this third Nexus yet. Here, also some Zergling counters. Very, very powerful in this matchup. Aggression with Zerglings. It would have been good to run in here and try a counterattack. You should always be looking for counterattacks, ZvP. If you get some Zerglings into that mineral line, you can just do a ton of damage. But here, still denying that third base, slowing it down even more. And here, his +1 Blink Stalker attack is coming in. This is a pretty common follow-up. You'll see, I believe, I pull some units around to come and flank him. Flanking is very good against Blink Stalkers, as it prevents him from doing the one-by-one Blink Stalker micro, where just no Stalkers ever die because the micro is so efficient at keeping them alive. Here we see the supply difference. That is usually the situation when you have a bunch of roaches. Roaches are very supply inefficient, so you just get a ton of supply compared to them. However, in terms of army size, army resource investment, his army is still really, really scary compared to mine, but I have a ton of roaches in production, so I will be able to whittle him down eventually. One problem is this hatchery placement on me is not actually very good. It kind of narrows the choke, gives him a good place to attack. But here we see those roaches swing around the back, give me that flank like I talked about. And this prevents him from just killing these roaches that he's trapped with the force fields. He has to chase these down, a little bit of control there. And now he's losing all his force fields, all his sentries. He's getting trapped here on creep. And the roaches are picking off his stalkers pretty easily. He's not really able to micro out of it because I have units attacking from every angle. And here we see my production kicking in. I got a really good economy up going into that. I got just as many drones as I possibly could, which is almost always your goal as the Zerg player. Here we see engaging off creep. You really don't want to do that. You want to pull back unless you can absolutely overwhelm your opponent, because Blink Stalker micro versus roaches off creep is incredibly efficient, and you just can't afford to do that unless you know you're going to absolutely destroy the battle. Here, still not the greatest engagements, really. I thought I was more ahead than I was. I thought I would be able to beat him pretty easily, given the economy I got up early on and the fact that I had 4 hatchery production. Obviously not quite working out, but still winning the battles enough to drive him back. And he doesn't have the third Nexus yet, so if he doesn't do damage with this, I'm going to be in really good shape. And here we can see just continuing roach production. At this point in the game, you want to do nothing except produce roaches and possibly Zerglings and hit your larva injects. There's nothing else Zerg needs to be doing until that third Nexus goes up, because Protoss is going to have to keep attacking until they try to expand again. And here we see him just continuing pure stalkers. I should have scouted this, should have realized that this is what he was doing and just gone Infester. However, this was at a point in the meta game where the roachling into muta switch was very, very popular. It's something Dongraguda does nearly every game, and I just kind of did that without thinking. You'll see a Spire come up pretty quickly. That was a really big problem in this game for me. You just absolutely have to scout and adapt to your opponent. The muta roachling style was very popular. However, this pure Blink Stalker style is very, very efficient versus it. Obviously, you don't really want to transition to mutas when your opponent is playing pure Blink Stalker. However, he does have that robo, so the switch to Immortal or Colossus was possible, and it's something you have to watch out for as well. And here we can see me breaking down the rocks, going in for aggression. When you have this many roaches, you do need to try and put pressure on your opponent. Roaches are very cost efficient, but they're not very supply efficient. So if you hit a 200-200 max on roaches, your army is just going to be much weaker than your opponent's. You just can't fit enough roaches to be good into a 200 supply army. They will always win a max battle like that. So you want to get rid of the roaches and then produce more. Here I was going for a bit of the mass roach attack that Stefano popularized, kind of a variation on the 12-minute roach attack. You can see that's why I have so many more roaches in production. I felt that I had a big enough advantage from the early game that I would be able to just wear him down. I underestimated the efficiency of the mass Blink Stalkers. He's controlling very well, obviously. He has good upgrades. My +2 armor hasn't quite finished yet. We see it's on the way. So that was not a good engagement by me. Like I said, I should have just fallen back and switched into Ling Infester. And here more roaches coming in, but just not enough. Blink Stalkers are far too powerful against pure roaches without the Ling or the Infester support. And we see he's just continuing to roost Blink Stalkers, no tech at all, and not even upgrading anymore. So it would have been a really good situation had I not done this. That was a bad decision. And here we can see him moving in, being aggressive. However, I have a bunch of Lings in production, so if he runs onto creep, he would get surrounded and killed. So he is forced to fall back. And I do have my 4th base up and running. I still do have a pretty big economic and supply lead. And I have started my muta production. And mutas, if you do get a large number of mutas, they are always a very good thing to have. Obviously, his base is completely empty. Yeah, he doesn't have really any kind of static defense in any of his bases. So if it gets to a situation where I have a lot of mutas up, then counterattacks and base races definitely go in my favor. That's one really good thing about mutas, especially if you're playing a game where both players were very aggressive early. It's very, very often that they will not have the kind of infrastructure that they need to deal with mutas. They won't have any kind of static defense. Their base just won't be that very well prepared because they were focused on so many other things in the early game. So that is a situation where muta switches are often quite good. Here also my baneling nest. Because he was focusing purely on stalkers, he had no sentries in the early game. He lost his initial sentries and just didn't reproduce them because he was spending all of his gateway timing on stalkers. He only has these 3 here. If your opponent does not have a ton of sentries, or a Templar or Colossus, then banelings are incredibly efficient. So getting a baneling nest as well as baneling speed upgrade. Mutiling, baneling in general is a very good composition as well. It's just they synergize well together. Ling baneling, obviously very good at taking out stalkers, and without the stalkers, then there's not too much to deal with in mutas, as long as you watch for an Archon switch. Archon's obviously very efficient versus every part of that composition, so that is kind of your kryptonite. However, if you switch to roaches and infestors, or if you get up to broodlords, then the Archons take a ton of gas away from the rest of the Protoss unit composition, so that's an okay situation. Here is a situation where I should have a counterattack out and ready. With Mutiling Baneling, you always want to have a counterattack ready, and as I said, he doesn't have a great defense against that. He doesn't have a building wall here or anything. However, I was just caught out of position. I was teching up to the Baneling speed and just getting my muta count up, so that's kind of unfortunate. And here we can see moving in for an attack, not working out very well at all. Very good force fields by him, also blinking in 1 stalker at a time to take the Baneling hits. That was really good control by him, but really poor attack from me. A big problem in this game boils down to just me being overconfident. When I held off his blink stalker attack so easily over here and had such a big advantage, I figured I could just go in for the kill with any kind of basic composition. But obviously his control didn't allow that to happen, so I ended up in a very unideal situation here. Here, continuing to go and try and be aggressive. I know that since I'm on player tech, I do need to keep trading armies, that I'm not going to be efficient if we get into the long game and he really starts to mass up. But he just has way too many stalkers for me to really do anything against that without hive tech. So engagement's not really going well for me. I still do have a big supply lead and good economy, and he does have bases starting to run out, but he's securing this top left base. It's just a lot of economy as he's already has the Templar Archives up and he has Templar out. He's upgrading Storm. Storm is very, very good against Mutiling Baneling, so that will be very difficult once he gets that up. However, here, let's going to try and poke in and do some harass. Again, his base is still empty. As a Zerg player, particularly with Mutiling Bane style, you really need to watch out for situations and opportunities like that where you can do a lot of damage with counterattacks. I will go in eventually, however, I needed to start doing it much sooner. And here was trying to move in for a flank, but didn't execute it very well. Here, heading up towards Infestor Tech and Hive as well. This is a little bit delayed, however I felt I was stuck on Lair Tech, and he has such a big army that it becomes scary to do any kind of teching because you feel you'll lose if you spend too many resources on things besides your army. Here, finally going in for a counterattack, realized that I could not fight against this army head-on, so I just sacked this expansion, send my army in to counterattack. Also start putting up a bunch of spine crawlers. This is incredibly important in any kind of base race situation where you feel that you might end up in a base race situation. Spine crawler is very good stack defense, obviously. They're just going to keep your base alive for longer. Here we see all of his probes going down. Just the entire army in his base, taking out everything. Focus down the pylons first is very important. That means he won't get any additional unit production. Those gateways, obviously, they don't work anymore, so he can't produce any more units. Took out a ton of probes here. However, the problem is just not really much I can do against that army. His units are just too much more efficient than mine. So taking out this Nexus is good. I've done a bunch of damage here. However, all of my grand units are trapped, and they're going to die to this army without really killing anything. So I'm left with just this Mutaforce, which is very good, but he has so many stalkers, and as well as access to Templar tech, that the mutas aren't going to be very efficient at all. So again, here trying to be aggressive, going in, trying to take out bases and counterattack, and just avoid direct engagements with his army, and pick off bases and just whittle him down without having to fight him. That's generally the way that you're going to play with mutas. Mutas, very, very great for harass units. They have good mobility, and they can deal damage quite a bit to unprotected targets. However, in straight-up fights, they're just not nearly cost-efficient relative to any of the counter units like Stalkers or Templar. or Archons or Phoenix. They're just the trade-off with them is that you get weak fighting units in exchange for great harass units. So you're always going to be trying to counterattack. And here another counter gets in, does a lot of damage, going to take out his Templar Archives, potentially the Nexus. And his army is cut out of position as I had my Mutalisks up here drawing them back to try and defend that. However, he does take down this hatchery. I still don't have this base, so I'm very low on economy at this point, unfortunately. And this Nexus is going down. And again, I still don't have Hive Tech as I've been putting everything into units trying to keep up with his army, trying to whittle it down, and having to deal with a couple of bad attacks that were really cost inefficient for me early on. And here we see that he does have this massive army, so again, I'm just trying to run around and split him up and fight away from his army, trying to take out bases and cripple him economically. And here we can see again that working, taking out cannons. No probe count here at all, but his army again comes back and chases me away. As soon as the army is there, I run away, try not to engage. However, I'm kind of trapped in a corner here, a little bit dangerous. Another wing attack coming in here, killing the Cyber Core. Obviously that prevents the stock production. Also prevents him from getting a Twilight Council if he doesn't already have one, and I believe he doesn't, which then prevents him from reproducing the Stalker or Templar Archives. So all that is very good. However, unfortunately, my Mutalist army got trapped up here. He picked off a lot of them, and those Mutalists are just absolutely important right now. They are what you're kind of relying on to run around and do damage and actually give yourself a chance in the game, since you're not going to be able to take that army head on with any composition that you can build off this kind of economy. So really, you just have to be entirely reliant on being annoying and harassing your opponent. So those mutas, you just can't afford to lose them like that. So while I've done a lot of damage to his base, and he's just now getting this expansion up, still in a lot of trouble as I lost all those mutas and I don't really have a backup tech prepared. You see, I have a lot of gas building up, but very little mineral income, so I prepare for an Infestor switch. Infestor is obviously very good against Stalkers as well, and potentially against Immortals and Archons if you get Neural Parasite, as nothing in this army is particularly long-ranged or good at picking off the Infestors, as long as you get good fungals down on all of the Stalkers. Here we see him coming in to do some damage, so immediately my Mutalist flock flies out to try and counterattack him again. I still know that I cannot beat this army, there's nothing I can really do about it, so I have to threaten his bases, force him to go home and be defensive. I can't deal with him attacking me. And here we can see all the Spine Crawlers, and my entire drone economy has been switched down to there. So I now have just the one running base. He has this base and this base, as his third base hasn't mined out nearly as quickly as mine, as he didn't take it as quickly. So that gives him a bit of an economic advantage. He has more resources stored up. Here we can see the Infestor production begun. As I said, I have a ton of gas built up. Infestors are very gas-heavy, powerful, efficient units, so they're a good choice for this situation. Also getting Neural Parasite, given that I'm going to have that many Infestors, it only makes sense to get Neural to get the most possible usage out of them. Here we see my Spine Crawler wall coming down here, trying to secure this expansion. At this point I know I have to kind of play a war of attrition. As I've always said, I can't take on that army. It's just way too efficient for the composition that I have, so I'm going to have to try and choke him out. Just secure my economy, really sit and turtle and be defensive and prevent him from taking this base or any of these bases. Prevent him from getting a bigger economy as well. The Spinecrawler Infestor is very, very efficient defensively, so that is a good choice here. It's going to be hard for him to break that, even with this very powerful army here. There was another little thing there. I kind of missed it on screen, but you should always keep an Overseer with your mutas when you're flying around in certain paths. Protoss will usually put their observers on paths like that and out in the center, just paths where Mutalisks are likely to fly or where attacks are likely to come from. So if you have an Overseer with your army, then you're capable of taking those out and leaving the Protoss blind, which makes it much more difficult for them to react to any kind of aggressive play. Particularly when you have Mutalisks out on the map, that's obviously very effective, as your entire play is based around running around and being where their army is not and engaging that way. So very, very important to take out observers here. And here he realizes I'm starting to secure a pretty big economy, so he's going to go in and try and attack here. It's very key to fungal him outside of range of the Spine Crawlers if you can at this point. That obviously just prevents his units from doing damage while your Stalkers hit away, or while your Spine Crawlers hit his army. However, he just has way too many units. I caught everything with fungal, but it doesn't really matter. He can just overpower me anyway. My mutas, again, not that useful in the straight-up fight, going back and trying to counterattack, trying to do damage here, but he just has way too much stuff. He has 3 cannons here, he has a bunch of Stalkers, and he's able to secure that while his big army goes through and kills all of my bases. This has been an EG replay review, kind of demonstrating the control of ZvP and some of the inefficiencies of the Muta style. If you enjoyed this and found this informative, please go to evilgeniuses.net to find a bunch of other great content like this from our other players, DeMuslim and In Control, as well as Machine, and more from myself. Thank you.